So dudes, it's Tuhu with the fresh cut. Akron will hit live servers later today at the time I'm making this video, so I wanted to get this out real quick before then. Courtesy of my Twitch chat and the boys over at my Discord server, twitch.tv/TowerStomper98, and the same name for my Discord server in case you're interested in stopping by, I came across this little thread over at the Akron main subreddit that lists a handful of reasons why rolling for her as a free-to-play player may not be a great idea. Doomposting, if you will. That Akron isn't worth it for free-to-play players or anyone else who at least isn't willing to shell out the cash to throw at Litecoin gacha for a signature. Having gone through Akron's kit on my own, independently of this thread or any other such Akron Doom posts from like Twitter or wherever else, for the record, I do agree with a lot of the points that this thread makes. I agree that as of right now, Akron has no appropriate free-to-play Litecoin, and the only 4-star Litecoin that makes sense at all is Good Night, which is gacha only, and without a signature, her damage drops off considerably, as it does for most of the 5-star DPS in the game too. Not to mention it also gives her more energy for faster ults, so that in turn makes her more viable for endgame content like MOC and Pure Fiction. However, there are also other points that I don't quite agree with either. In my opinion, you don't need to take double Nihility teammates for Akron, she just needs one, and then she can just take a Harmony support with a strong attack buff instead. I'm also not quite too sure what Op was on about when they were talking about the trend Litecoin. I assume they were talking about the trend of universal markets Litecoin and how it'll help Akron a bunch if you give her a preservation support with that Litecoin equipped, but unless I'm misunderstanding how strong that really is, I figure you could just probably do the same thing by giving Akron a Nihility DOT teammate with something like Resolution. So with this as the context, I want to talk about Doomposting in Hoyoverse gachas, because while a degree of this can happen in other games, obviously it happens the most for Genshin and Star Rail, and no rewards for guessing as to why. Specifically, at the risk of sounding like a Reddit moderator, I kindly want to remind everyone that Doomposting about an upcoming character is fucking stupid. So let me give it to you straight. You should roll for characters that you like in gacha games. Revolutionary concept, I know. Waifus, husbandos, everything in between. Roll for whoever makes your dick hard or your pussy itch first and foremost. Characters are the most important aspect in these sorts of gacha games because they're the focal point of their, well, gachas. So whether or not they end up being good should always be secondary to simply having them at all. So when you doom post about a character and make a thread about it on Reddit or bitch about it on Twitter and Elongated Musket decides that that's the tweet that should go viral tomorrow, someone out there who was really looking forward to that character is going to see that, probably, and might have second thoughts about rolling for that character now. Hell, they might change their minds and end up skipping that character altogether because they don't want to be known as that dude, online who rolled for a, quote, bad character to their friends or to other random people online. You might say, well, sucks to suck, that's their problem for not sticking to their guns, but would you believe it when I tell you that there are a ton of people out there who are easily influenced or swayed by shit that they see on the internet? And when it comes to gacha games, there are no better examples of this than Genshin and Star Rail players, especially Genshin players. Remember when Genshin players back in the day doom posted about various 5-star characters before they were officially put into the game? Characters like Ganyu, they called her Cryo Amber or something. Kazuha, 5-star Sucrose. Dissing Yoimiya just because, everyone was too busy circle jerking to Raiden just because she had a banner right after. And don't even get me started on the absolute disrespect that they put on my girl Kokomi back in the day just because she couldn't crit. So would you believe that there were tons of Genshin players back then who skipped the first banners for those characters only to realize just how good they ended up being after their rate ups were gone? In other words, you could say that the community sabotaged their own players by telling them not to roll for a lot of characters who turned out to be amazing because they were doom posting about how they weren't going to be worth it or something. I mean, we've already seen this happen in Star Rail too, just to a smaller degree, since Star Rail isn't as big as Genshin is, obviously, with people regretting skipping characters like Luocha and Fushuan. Which means that if you do this wrong, right? Which unfortunately, given Genshin's track record, the Hoyoverse community seems to do most of the time. Doom posting has a potentially crippling effect on the community because by convincing players not to roll for a character who may end up being good later on, even if it takes future content to buff them retroactively, you're basically breaking their accounts. And I'd like to ask you at that point why you're not playing Among Us instead, with how badly you just sabotaged all these people. And even worse when you consider Star Rail is barely a year old now, and many players are still in the middle of making critical decisions about rolling characters for the sake of stabilizing their accounts. Another point that I want to bring up as to why I think Doom posting is stupid is something that I mentioned just a minute ago. Hoyoverse has a tendency to buff characters by adding future content. Again, just like a Genshin. The most famous example of this was when Electro characters and Kokomi got massively buffed by the addition of Dendro. Oh, what's that? Kokomi can't crit? Oh, that's fine. She'll just settle for becoming one of the best, if not the best, Bloom or Hyper Bloom support in the game. And if that weren't enough, she's now even BFFs with Farina. No big deal. And other examples include Fischl with her new BIS artifact set in 4-piece Golden Trope, and Zhao with Shenyun Plunge support. Hell, we even have a clear example of this in Star Rail too, with Jingyuan being considered top tier now that Hanabi's in the game, as long as you pair them together, of course. So even if Acheron turns out to be pretty mid now, there's always a chance that miHoYo adds stuff later that can help her out, either in the form of additional light cones, or extra support characters, or whatever else. This is a big thing that most Doom posts simply fail to take into account, the fact that future content can retroactively buff characters, which they should, because miHoYo has a track record of doing this sort of thing already. Again, if they were able to do that for someone like Jingyuan, they can do it for anybody, especially for someone like Definitely Not Right in May. In fact, the thread I started this video with even indirectly acknowledges this by mentioning a future Nihility healer, which doesn't exist right now obviously, but may show up later. More to the point, apparently there's a recent leak online, on Twitter or wherever, about how there's supposedly a 4-star Nihility light cone that's exactly what Acheron wants because it gives crit stats, and assuming this is true, this would perfectly illustrate the point that I'm trying to make here. One last thing I want to point out to end this video on is just the fact that you should wait for a character to officially come out first and then see how they are gameplay-wise. miHoYo is known to tweak characters that are still in development, especially in Star Rail, with leakers posting updates on Twitter about characters in beta, getting buffs and nerfs as miHoYo tunes them to get them ready for final release. Not only that, but once they're out, miHoYo does not touch them again. What this means is that you should never trust how good or bad people say a character is, or at the very least, you should take what people are saying about them with a grain of salt, if they're still in beta or before they're actually part of the game. Like, I get it. I understand that knowing what a character can do and having a rough idea of how good or bad they are is nice to know and can certainly help people plan out their gacha rolls going into the future. I mean, that's the whole point of, all these leaks in the first place. And at their core, a lot of Doom posting is well-intentioned because people are just trying to help others look out for characters who might not be worth rolling. Matter of fact, I know this better than most Hoyoverse gacha players. Imagine playing the NA server of a gacha game that's 2 whole fucking years behind the original server. FGO, by the way. But the problem with this sort of clairvoyance, as us FGO players call it, in Hoyoverse games specifically, is that not only is it not perfect, certainly not as strong as other games have it, but it's also grossly amplified by the sheer number of players that Genshin and Star Rail have. So if you have a bad take pop up from somewhere and somehow it starts gaining traction online, it doesn't take much for it to then spread throughout the rest of the community like it's another wildfire in California. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happens sometimes, like that one time Genshin players thought Bennett was trash. Admittedly, this has only really happened in Genshin so far, but that's not to say that it can't also happen in Star Rail too, and given that Star Rail is a far more serious gacha than Genshin likely ever will be, simply because one has endgame and the other doesn't, the damage that incorrect Doom posting can do to the Star Rail player base will be orders of magnitude more devastating than anything Genshin Doom posters were ever able to achieve. live. And once a new character does come out, you should then wait a week or so to see what the community's final assessment of them is. People can test characters far better on live servers than they can in like beta clients or whatnot, since hands-on testing combined with theory crafting will always be better than theory crafting alone. Once people start assessing how good or bad a character really is, then you can decide whether you want to roll for him or not. Like, there's a reason why Hoyoverse banners last for as long as they do. You have the luxury of time for people to tell you for sure if a character is worth pulling or not, something that a lot of other gachas out there simply don't. So use it, damn it. Anyways, that'll do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Hoyoverse content. Check out the stream over at twitch.tv/ToaSniper98. I will be rolling for Acheron and making a first impressions video of her after doing a bit of testing with her. And, of course, thanks for watching.